The first injury reports for the season are coming out. A lot of practice reports. First game Thursday night. We're going to talk about all the big issues. We're going to talk about building lineups with my guest Al Zeidenfeld. Looking forward to doing it here on the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Hey everybody, welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm Jeff Erickson. My guest today is Al Zeidenfeld. You can catch Al a lot of places, ESPN Plus, his Twitch channel on YouTube. I'm probably leaving a few out. Al, you're all over the place. You're omnipresent, and for good reason. You've been doing this, a good amount of while with a lot of success, and I really appreciate you spending part of your day with me today.
Thank you. Yeah, it's very hard to try and explain to, okay, where can I find your stuff? Well, literally everywhere. I've got 2 YouTube channels that are going to have content 6-7 days a week. I'm live on Twitch every day, kind of like a radio show for 2 to 3 hours, and article on ESPN, Fantasy Focused Football Podcast, 0600 every Thursday with Mike Clay and Daniel Dopp. It's like, it's hard to miss me if you're in the DFS space. I got content somewhere that you're used to visiting.
Yeah, exactly. And I love seeing it there. I love how much Twitch is blown up. I'm gonna have Paul Sporer on tomorrow, and he's for baseball. He's like the man on Twitch. I feel like, and I know you've just carved out a great channel for yourself on Twitch as well. And I love seeing that. New avenues for people to check everybody out here.
Yeah, it was a vacated space a few years ago, and I said, there's nobody doing fantasy football content on Twitch. Why don't I just try and fill that vacated space? And it's worked out very well.
That's great. That's great. I mean, I know gamers love it. And the Venn diagram of gamers and fantasy football players, there's a huge overlap. So it seems like that would make logical, perfect sense. So I'm glad to see that there. As alluded to, we got some news. I got some interesting news items here. Starting off, George Kittle. I've got a lot of exposure to Kittle in my in some in best ball, but in my managed teams especially, which is a little troublesome. That he picked up a groin injury on Monday in practice. Isn't going to practice today. They're going to watch this. I know we were talking earlier how Wednesday injury notes, sometimes we're not too concerned about that, especially a guy like Kittle. Maybe they manage him. I don't like that he picked it up on Monday, though.
No. So typically, especially for veterans, I just ignore the Wednesday practice report. Some guys just don't practice. Obviously, I'm a little more in tune to it in week 1, especially if it's something like Kittle, where it wasn't a known thing coming into the week. So if it's a new injury that he picked up on Monday, that's a little more concerning to me, but typically the Friday practice report is the one that I'm most paying attention to. Thursday is the one that perks my ears up a little bit. So if he keeps missing practices, that's not great. If he misses Friday, that usually indicates that they are not going to be likely to play.
Exactly. And when a player is unsure of a player's availability, when he himself, the player, isn't that positive about it there, that's when that's like a massive red flag for me. I mean, you get sometimes where, the player's like, oh, I'm going to be in. Fine. You can't keep me out of there. Well, yeah, you can keep you out of there. And they do. And then there's the shiny, happy optimism from Pete Carroll, which you always have to discount too. So like Kenneth Walker III probably had like 3 organs removed, but he's maybe doing everything he can on Monday to be able to play. We'll see. But that's, you got to watch on some of the things like that. Another guy we're watching closely, Deontay Johnson, limited practice. Again, maybe not that big of a deal, except he missed he got hurt in the last preseason game, hurt his shoulder. And the quotes here, this is where it gets me. I said, he tried to do everything my arm allowed me to do. And he's doing literally everything in his power to be available for the season opener. That's not exactly positive news.
No. And like, he projected to be the one wide receiver in that room that was going to be on the field literally at all times. Like, all the snap reports from preseason with the ones was in 2 receiver sets. He was out there 100% of the time, and Claypool and the rookie Pickens were splitting 50-50. And 3 wide receiver sets, he was out there 100% of the time. Really unfortunate that he picked up that injury. I was kind of the mindset that he was not going to be ready to play week 1 and probably week 2 after what the initial reports were. So I'm not all that shocked by it, but obviously we adjust. So like, Pickens will be a big value in daily fantasy this week if he's going to play 100% of the snaps.
Mike Tomlin has drawn a little bit of heat for playing a lot of the starters in the preseason. He takes a different approach than the Bengals, who didn't use their starters at all. Kind of Zach Taylor from the Rams tree, the McVay tree kind of makes sense. That's what the Rams do too. They do have intense practices. The Rams and Bengals did have a joint practice session. Rumor has it there was some intensity on that.
A little bit.
Not quite the same as a game necessarily, but I understand. Tomlin's never had a losing season. He may know how to prepare a team for a season. I'm just going to go out on a limb and suggest that that's possible, as opposed to Jeff from a seat in Monrovia versus on the field watching his players. Perhaps he knows what he's doing. But, man, he's caught some heat this year because TJ Watt got banged up. They hid the Najee Harris injury for a full month, and now the news on Johnson.
And look, to cast absolutely no shade on a extremely accomplished NFL coach, but it's, like having a Hall of Fame tier quarterback for a decade plus, it cleans up a lot of messes. Not saying he's messy, but when you got that Hall of Fame quarterback, it's like, we're still going to win a lot of games. So he's finally going to be a little bit under fire this year with Mitch Trubisky and a rookie that's not really highly heralded coming into the league as a draft prospect. So
right.
He's got to do some work this year. He's actually got to work for a living now.
Yeah, and that's probably why he was using his starters more than other teams, because they don't have the quarterback settled. In fact, we finally announced that Trubisky will be the starter over Kenny Pickett. To the surprise of nobody, but Pickett did show some good things here and there against second and third team defenses. Maybe there's some hope for the future, but it might be rough initially, especially because I think that offensive line, while improved a little bit, is not a plus offensive line either.
No, it's still one of the worst in the league. So and Harris might be a little banged up as well, so they can't hang 400 plus touches on him this year. Like I said, Tomlin's going to have to work for a living this year. It's going to be a different situation.
100%. So we'll be watching that one closely. Another one I'm watching closely is I've got some exposure to Allen Lazard in leagues. I speculated he'd be the top wideout target for Aaron Rodgers. Maybe not the top target. That could be Aaron Jones. But I still think Lazard could be pretty handy, and he's falling in the 7th and 8th round in managed leagues. He's been out of practice for about a week now. They were kind of quiet about why. Now they've kind of acknowledged that he got stepped on. I almost, transitioning from Tomlin to this news, same sort of thing with Harris, and now they're talking about that with Lazard. We just know it's lower body right now when we know he didn't practice today.
So I'm less concerned with Lazard. Obviously, you monitor this as things go along. So I guess I have tiers for this stuff. So Wednesday practice is in a different tier from Friday practice. Structural injuries are in a much different tier for me than just aches and pain injuries. They have some great drugs that they can distribute on Sundays to make these guys not feel pain for 4 hours at all, and they just go out there and do their job. So if this is just a pain management sort of a situation for Allen Lazard, then he might be fine. My question is, and I know we're just in the injury portion, but this is going to be a very interesting situation if Lazard is questionable or possibly can't go or isn't 100% and might only play a limited amount of snaps. The hype beast for the last month at wide receiver has been Romeo Doubs.
Right.
So, or Dobbs, sorry, not Dubs. What does this do to him if Lazard is out? Is it just him and Watkins in 2 receiver sets this weekend?
That's a great question. It's a really great question. I mean, are there going to be times when you see Jones and Dillon on the field at the same time to kind of counteract the lack of trust? Rodgers seems to me like a big circle of trust sort of guy. I mean, and we don't even know if Tunyon's going to be able to play. That's another one where Tonyan also was of the mindset that, I remember his quote was not exactly glowing with optimism.
Yeah, it's going to be one, you do have to be in his circle, right? You do have to have his trust for him to throw you the ball. And I know that there's been that narrative that he's never thrown the ball to rookie wide receivers, but Devontae Adams and Jordy Nelson didn't do much when they were rookies. However, they were 3rd, 4th, 5th on the depth chart. The wide receiver room when they were rookies was a lot different than the wide receiver room this year. There's a lot of vacated targets. Obviously, Devontae Adams gone, as you mentioned, Tonyan not be ready. And now if Lazard is gone, that's every target from last year vacated. So they're going to have to be soaked up by somebody.
Yeah, and when you think of trust, you think of Sammy Watkins, right?
Really? That's one player you can trust for 1 week a year. Yes. Luckily, it's that week.
It's true. It is true. So is he a DFS play for you?
No. Dobbs would be, though. He's minimum salary on draft.
Yeah, that's true.
If he's on the field 80% of the time, I'm probably going to be clicking his name a lot.
Yeah, I can imagine. Do you have a preferred platform? Do you prefer DraftKings, FanDuel, any other platform?
Those are the two that I play on the most.
Okay.
I kind of split my play between DraftKings and FanDuel.
Okay, very cool. We'll talk more about that momentarily.
Mhm.
A couple other news items. One very positive. We've been in a little bit of negative. How about Chris Godwin? We're talking about
Mhm.
maybe missing 4 weeks, torn ACL, torn MCL, and yet he had a full practice, no brace on his knee.
Mhm.
It looks like for all intents and purposes, he's going to play on Sunday night. I'd maybe argue that he doesn't get full reps, and I'd be careful about playing him. But I mean, this is really good news.
Exactly. So it's obviously a tough injury to come back from. Everybody recovers differently from those sorts of injuries, but he was in camp from like day one. We thought that he wasn't going to be there. He was practicing with a brace. They did get some backups or depth, let's say, with Julio Jones and with Russell Gage, who I expected to run in the slot for a bunch of the times. Like, we're kind of talking a little bit with these injuries about snap percentage. I wouldn't expect that normal 85+% snap percentage from Godwin in week one. Even if he is able to go, they're
Right.
probably going to ease him back in. It's way more important for a Tom Brady led offense to be healthy in December and January, and for them hopefully into February, as that's what they're planning, than to play 90% plus of the snaps in September.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a whole lot of sense there. One last news item here.
Mhm.
Michael Thomas, limited at practice on Wednesday. He's missed the last couple of weeks because of a hamstring. He is the poster child for being anti-injury optimistic from the last two
Mhm.
seasons and what's happened with his ankle. We'll see was the quote from Dennis Allen about Thomas's availability there per Mike Triplett. We'll see where he's at, but he's certainly progressing.
Yeah, the
Again,
Percy Harvin Award winner, Michael
yes,
Thomas. Yes.
yes, exactly. I've walked away with no shares of Thomas so far this season. I've kind of in my rankings, I've ridden the roller coaster a little bit, but I haven't been able to click that button, not once.
So I hate making do not draft videos, right? I mean, we make a
Right,
ton of content. We have to fill that. We have to flood the space in the off season. We have to put out content, and obviously there's must draft, and then everybody likes the must avoid videos. I hate doing the do not draft or must avoid. So I kind of shaped it around. I have not drafted any of these players because I do
right,
like 100+ drafts every summer because of best ball. So I was like, here's guys that I have not drafted. If you want to draft them, you go ahead. But here's who I'm not drafting, but I'm a little bit afraid. And Michael Thomas, obviously, if he plays a ton and he's not going to get 30 to 33% of the market share targets anymore. But like, what if he got 25 to 27%? Yeah, it's scary. He could do some things in the 7th round, but like, I wasn't clicking him because, you know, Percy Harvin. Like, for you and I, being Angelinos and a little bit older, we've got a little bit of the gray hair. It's like it
yes,
used to be
sir.
Mike Marshall with the sprained eyelash, and he'd missed 2 months of the baseball season. Then it became Percy Harvin in the
Yep.
'90s and early 2000s. Now it's Michael Thomas. Hey, I stubbed my toe in the middle of the night. I'm going to miss 2 seasons.
Do you remember Chris Brown, the third baseman for the Padres and
Yeah.
Giants? Yeah,
Hmm.
I think he actually had the eyelashes as an issue at one point in time. He passed away young, R.I.P. on him. But it
Yep.
was exactly one of those type of players. I always there's certain guys like that, and early on, you probably could have gotten them pretty at a reasonable price. And even then I was chicken little, just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So there you go. Before we move on and start talking lineups for this week, quick note from one of our sponsors, Monkey Knife Fight. Football is officially back on Monkey Knife Fight with all the NFL action you're looking for. And if college football is more your speed, they've got plenty of that too. On Monkey Knife Fight, there's no sharks, no salary caps, and no math. It's just easy to play, easy to win, daily fantasy player props. Join now at monkeyknifefight.com and you'll get your first game free. Then use promo code RWNFL to get your first deposit matched instantly up to $100. So what are you waiting for? Join Monkey Knife Fight today. Jeff Erickson here. I'm here with Al Zeidenfeld. We have many platforms for Al to talk about and the things that he does. Al, week one is a different beast than any other week in the season in the DFS world. You get your salaries way in advance.
Mm-hmm.
It's a open palette. When they first release those salaries, what's the first thing you do?
So I look for the inefficiencies. I look for the poorly priced players that are just way too cheap. And then obviously more things like that are going to happen as camp goes along. So like you're never going to be short for value in week one because
Right.
for a couple reasons. Obviously, week one is the big week on all the sites and they're trying to They get the largest amount of traffic, especially new customers that come into the site. So if that's the case, they want to make it as fun as possible for them to make lineups. So they're not really going to tighten the screws on you in terms of the salary. So they're not going to make it tight. And then obviously, because the salaries come out like a month, 5 weeks before the season starts, you're going to have injury issues. So like there's tons of value.
Right.
Most specifically at the wide receiver position with like we had mentioned Romeo Dobbs before. If he is a starter, he's 3K on DraftKings. That's the absolute minimum for wide receivers. Wan'Dale Robinson forced into slot work for the Giants, 3K. Dotson on Washington, 3.4. But like even before that, like Kadarius Toney was 4.1, and I thought that was an egregiously low price versus what everybody else is. So like there's plenty of value at wide receiver. And then there's one at running back with Dameon Pierce, who's another one of those hype beasts through the month. But like, do I really want to play a running back that's an 8.5 point dog? He's cheaper than he should be in that situation because he was not the starter or assumed to be the starter back when they released the lineups or the salaries on like August the 1st. So he's artificially low, but like, I'm not sure that it matters all that much with him. The wide receivers are where all the value is.
Right. And in the case of Pierce too, you got to imagine that's where the market's going too. Yeah. If you're worried, and I'm not, okay, this is me not being a DFS pro. I'm just someone that dabbles in DFS. Roster percentage, how big of a concern is that when you got, a really low priced, obvious guy like Pierce?
So here's the thing. If you're playing cash games, so let's define those as anything that pays out 33% or more of the field. Your triple ups, your double ups, 50-50s, head-to-head games. Percentage doesn't matter.
Okay.
Right. In fact, it works in your favor because it becomes kind of a prove it to me or show it to me sort of a situation. So like if Christian McCaffrey is going to be one of the highest played players on the slate, he's 8,600. We all know what he can do. I don't have to define it for you, right? But especially on DraftKings with full point PPR and bonuses for 100 yards, he can double bonus, get you 3 points for each. It gets a point for each reception. He's gotten like average like 8+ targets each of the last 3 week ones that he has played. He projects even without a touchdown to score a ton of points. So a lot of people are going to be on him, but like I'd rather make my opponent figure out where they're going to find those 25 to 30 fantasy points. You just play him. Where in a tournament, it's a different sort of philosophy because like I don't have to finish first in a cash game. If you're playing in 100-man 50-50, I just got to be in the top 50. I don't have to be faster than the bear. I just have to be faster than you. But in a tournament, I have to like outrun everyone, right? Where like there's 100,000 people that are playing and I have to get 250 points, 225 to 250 to have a realistic chance of winning the money. And the majority of it, 20 to 40% of it is in first place. You're going to have to take some chances. You're going to have to avoid some players. You're going to have to leverage versus the field. If everybody's going to be on Jonathan Taylor, maybe you stack Matt Ryan. Like if they're going to score 35 points, Taylor might not have 5 touchdowns. In fact, he might have 1 or 0. But what if Matt Ryan throws 3 or 4 and he's going to be at a much lower percentage, especially when paired with 1 or 2 of his pass catchers? That's a route to the top as opposed to just following the herd in tournaments. Cash games, go ahead. Go with the herd. Play the right players.
Do you prefer playing more of your action in cash games or in tournaments?
So this is a do what I say, not what I do sort of philosophy. So at high stakes, the game is different than the game is at low stakes. So a lot of my audience plays, I mean, just because of the pyramid of like, there's less high stakes players than there are low stakes players, right? So you end up grinding steel on steel when you get to the top of the food chain, the $100, $500, $1,000 plus buy-in games. We're all working off of projections at that point. We all understand game theory. We all know who the right players are. So in head-to-head games, it's literally like a 1 versus 1 in your lineup. If you're playing 9 players, 7, 8 of them are the same as like everybody else that you're playing. And then you're coin flipping with 1 player versus 1 player. It's like, I'd rather not play that way. So my play is trended more towards tournaments because it's a different game and I can play percentages versus the field and leverage and know where the crowd's going to go. And then I can find ways to differentiate. But for lower stakes players, if you're somebody who plays like $20 to $500, I know it's a wide range, but if you play between $20 and $500 every week, maximizing the amount of opponents you can get in those $1 and $2 head-to-heads, because of that being the fat part of the pyramid, the scores, the average score line in cash games at that level is lower.
Sure.
And so there's there's bad players at every buy-in level. There's just more of them percentage-wise at the low stakes, and there's more players at the low stakes, meaning that you have a much higher percent chance of matching up against a bad player who's going to fade somebody like Christian McCaffrey in week 1 and not play the obvious value play that's 3K, and you can really clean up. So I just can't make enough money in $1 and $2 head-to-heads, and I'm limited to playing like 20 or 30 of them. It just doesn't make sense anymore. But if you're one of those smaller tier players, smaller bankroll players, it makes a ton of sense to put like 50% of your money into of your spend every week into head-to-head games at $1, $2, $3, because high stakes players, 1, aren't allowed to play that level, and 2, even if we're capped at playing a certain amount of them, and you can't make enough. It's like, okay, right, you have $10,000 or $20,000 out there in tournament entry fees, and it's like, okay, you have $70 in head-to-heads. All right, so thank God I won those $60 in head-to-heads, because that put me ahead for the week. No, that's impossible.
Right.
You have to play the higher dollar stuff. So you're kind of herded away from those. So you're away from the sharks a little bit at the $1, $2, $3 range, and there's a lot of people that just aren't good at the game, especially early in the season.
Yeah, and arguably the ones that are bad at the game and play at high stakes, well, they don't stay there very long,
because
then they get pruned. Whereas you have a better chance of sticking around at a lower buy-in level for a much longer time. That's part of the argument in favor of doing that if you're relatively new or just aren't as good at DFS.
Yeah, but like it's play the right plays in cash. Tournaments is where you can get cute, and especially the first 4 weeks of the season, because like you and I study this stuff constantly, and we have ideas. We know what offensive coordinators and defensive coordinators know. We can assess rosters and things like that. But like, we think we know who these teams are, but we don't always have the exact right idea. Things can change. And the example I always use is the Dallas Cowboys from, I don't know, like 5 years ago, when DeMarco Murray was like the guy. The Dallas Cowboys were one of the worst teams in the NFL on paper coming into that year, specifically defensively. They were horrifically bad, almost historically bad defensively.
Right.
And their coaching staff recognized that, and none of the fantasy analysts gave, myself included, I'm not like pointing at anybody else, the quote, the experts didn't see this coming. But none of us thought that defense was going to be any good. And in fact, it wasn't. Like, on a per play basis, they were one of the worst defenses of all time. But their coaching staff figured this out and said, you know what? What if we just don't let the other team touch the ball ever and just give it to DeMarco 480 times or whatever he got it that year,
right?
And we'll play keep away. And he was like the best play ever, but nobody played him in daily fantasy the first 2, 3, 4 weeks of the season. So if you were on him, you made a ton of money because you weren't going where the crowd was going, and you were making that contrarian play. So the best time of the season for you to trust your narratives, for you to trust yourself over data, is when we don't have as much data. So the best time to be contrarian is September when it comes to winning or playing in daily fantasy tournaments. Trust yourself early in the season.
So to that end, what is one good contrarian play this season?
This week or this season?
This week. Let's go this week.
So for me, it really comes down to leverage, right? So players are going to be priced at whatever their price is, and then projections are going to come out, and daily fantasy becomes so much of a projection-based game. At this point, with everybody having access to great projections. You guys have your own set at RotoWire, right?
Right.
And they're time tested, and you guys believe in them. And if you say, well, this player is projected for X amount of points, but his price is Y, that puts him at a good value in daily fantasy this week. I kind of like the guys that are going to be high ceiling plays, but may not be a great play in terms of their points per dollar. So like this week for me, there's two. They're high price players. I'm going to pay up to be contrarian on somebody like Tyreek Hill or Justin Jefferson. Hill is priced a little bit lower, 6,800. And Justin Jefferson, 7,800. Both are fantastic plays. Both can blow the roof off of a slate by themselves. And if you're telling me they're going to both be less than 15%, that's a player that I want to spend up to be contrarian on, especially when the standard build this week is going to be to pay up at running back and look for value at wide receiver. So I can pay up at a position where other people aren't and get access to a superstar or two that's going to differentiate my lineup from other people.
Right. And especially you're talking about McCaffrey being the plug and play option there. Well, if you can't really, it's hard to afford both Jefferson and McCaffrey. So that's a good alternative to try to find that there.
Yeah. Spend where they're not. Zig when they zag.
Yeah. from Al Z, zigging and zagging. I like it there. Quick note before we move on, we'll talk about more things about this slate and maybe some of the differences between the two major sites as well. And this is from our friends at Hoffer. Hoffer proudly brings you fantasy sports in your complete control. Goodbye are the days of salary caps and house-based games. Instead, say hello to simple fan-made custom contests. On Hoffer, you create contests on your own terms. You pick the entry fee, you pick the number of seats, you pick the athletes, you pick the stats, you pick it all. Choose between one of Hoffer's 12 different gameplays, then set the basic contest terms and write the multiple choice questions, which can be as easy as more passing yards, Mahomes or Brady. Let your sports imagination run wild. It's only contests made by fans for fans on Hoffer. All contests feature live leaderboards to track your progress during the game and full player transparency to see who you are competing against. Unlock a $50 deposit bonus and earn an additional $10 for each friend you invite. It's a whole new world in the DFS game, and Hoffer is ahead of the pack. So don't wait. Download Hoffer, that's Hofr, and challenge your friends today. All right, I'm here with Al Zeidenfeld. We're talking about a lot of week one. We're talking about his approach. One of the things I want to ask is when do you start building your lineups? How quick, say not this week, because this week, obviously you have a lot more lead time. Mm-hmm. Are you on it Monday night, Tuesday morning? How quickly are you in building your lineups for the upcoming week?
I used to be, I'm not anymore. So now, and maybe the content schedule that I have it protects me from myself, because I feel like it becomes a game of telephone when you start making lineups on Monday and then Tuesday. And then by the time you get to Saturday, it's purple monkey horseshoe, and it doesn't sound anything like it sounded on Monday. And your initial stances were probably somewhat right, or more right than when you get to your 56th iteration.
Right.
So I hold off on really making lineups until Friday afternoon. I put out my content. All of my content is done by the time I'm done with my stream on Friday afternoon. Okay. Then I sit down and I start making allocations for tournaments. That's when I build my main lineup, my high stakes tournament lineup by hand. That's when I make, maybe if I'm going to play a 3-max game, I'll make my other 2. And then I start working on with an optimizer about trying to leverage the field and working on my quarterback pairings and double stacks and bring back players and secondary stacks and getting all that together. Then I take Saturday completely off. I spend Saturday with my family because I've been working all week on football stuff, and I get back to work early Sunday morning until kickoff.
I like it. And it's so important to strike that work-life balance, or football life balance, as the case may be. We are blessed to be able to work in something we love, so it's very nice to be able to do that. But I like that you have that full Saturday there. Spend that time with the kids, coach them up. I've been coaching soccer for 14 years. You're coaching baseball, and coaching's the best. I love coaching.
It's got a lot of pluses. There are some minuses, obviously.
Yes.
Unfortunately, there's always going to be minuses, but the pluses vastly outweigh them.
I always say youth sports would be great if there weren't any parents, but that's usually the minus side of things. But luckily, I've even been kind of lucky there, so that's pretty good.
Same.
Okay, knowing your game that you're playing is important too. Obviously, you change things a lot. I don't do well on showdown slates. I don't do well on single game contests. I prefer a wider game slate. How much are you invested in these smaller slates?
So I'm a main slate player primarily.
Okay.
I play island games, but I really only play them for the bankability factor. I'm trying to win the big tournament on that. So I have my lineup building style, which I've been completely transparent with on all of my videos. Here's how I'm going to build lineups. It's going to be 100% done through the optimizer. I'm going to focus on these things. I'm going to manicure it very slightly. And I'm not trying to minimize the game, because there's a lot of strategy that can go into it. Some people are really good in my community at single entry showdown stuff.
Right.
I like to play the 150 max big tournament where there's $1 million up top, and you're not going to win it solo, but maybe you split it with less people. And for me, like I said, I'm not trying to minimize it, but it's kind of like Keno on those showdown slates. Look, I know what my process is. It's different from Keno. I don't have a crayon. I'm not just guessing at stuff. I have things that I know work from a math perspective with fantasy football. I get the combinations that I want. I enter in the game and I watch the game, and then I don't check the standings until 2 minutes left, because showdown moves way too much. But that's my approach to that. It's way different from my main slate play. But I don't play like the 2-game slates. I don't play the there used to be like a Monday, Thursday slate back in the day, like the prime time slate. I don't like the 2 and the 3-game slates as much. I'm a main slate guy. I like the big prizes that are on the main slate, and I like having more options that I can use to leverage against other people. Where if everybody's going this way, I can find a route over here where those 2 roads diverge in the yellow wood.
How much did you play in the preseason? Are you into that at all?
I used to be, but not as much.
Yeah.
Like 6, 7, 8 years ago, preseason was a totally different animal. Like you could play in the Hall of Fame game and everybody would like 30-40% of the field would have the starting quarterback and like just dead spots on their lineup. People are way more in tune now with everything. So the edge is still there, but it's less there than it was in years past. And like, it's just not that fun to me. So like, I prefer to stick to the regular season stuff. I take as much time off in the off season as possible. And that includes from playing preseason fantasy football.
Right. And you also play a lot more DFS and best ball than you do managed teams for season long, correct?
Yeah. So the only 2 managed leagues that I was in last year were the Scott Fish Bowl, which I'm in again this year. I enjoy doing the Scott Fish Bowl. And last year, I don't know if we're doing it this year, but last year we did a guillotine league, which was so much fun.
Yes.
At ESPN, where you draft. It's an 18 or 17 personally. I forget it was 17 or 18 with the 18-week season. But you basically draft for every week, and every week somebody's eliminated, and all their players go to the waiver wire. I sweated that as much as I sweat my my DFS lineups, and it was a totally free league just for content purposes. But I really, really enjoyed that play style because it was just different.
It is. It's a fantastic format. I jumped in a couple of them last year, and luckily made it to the finals in one of them, although unluckily lost in the finals. Totally unlucky. It wasn't just skill or anything at all, but no. But the tricky part there too is like, okay, do I go all in on this free agent in week 2, or do I try to manage it and try to pick off bargains here and there? Because as you go on, the quality of the waiver wire gets better and better and better. You want to be able to have a little bit of leverage as far as that goes. But it's great. It's a fascinating concept, and I love doing it. I love that there's like the vulture leagues, or there people use different phrases for it there, where one person like starts with the team that's like built off of the waiver wire undrafted. You have to be a little bit thinner to begin with there, and you guys do the draft, and I'm going to come in and take the leftovers, and I'm going to beat you with that, and then I get to take your player, something like that. So I love that there's so much creativity with all these formats.
Like playing for pink slips.
Yeah, exactly. It's tremendous. So I love seeing that there. I love that there's all these different ways. But best ball, what were your like with your roster builds? Was there like a theme for you? Is there a certain way you like to build your best balls this year?
I focus on correlation through the quarterback, but sometimes that's tough to get.
Right.
But I do want to build like a double stack around my quarterback with 2 of their pass catchers minimum. There's very few that I would go to 3 or 4 with. Like if I have the Bills, I don't mind having all the Bills. If I have the Buccaneers, I don't mind drafting 3 other Buccaneers. But like if it's not as heavy a pass oriented, like if I have Jalen Hurts and Brown, I'm probably not going to go get Devontae and Goddard and somebody like they're just not going to throw it enough to warrant doing that. But like the high volume, super high volume ones that throw it 650 plus times a year, yeah, I'll load up on those guys. I got week 17 correlation wherever I could get it, but I didn't force it. I wasn't reaching by like a round or 2 to get it because I play mostly tournament best ball as opposed to cash game or sit and go best ball.
Right.
Whereas sit and go is a 17-week regular season with no playoffs. It's just a total points league. So yeah, you want to draft the most value that you can get. You want to draft volume. You want to try and have the highest floor team on it every single week, as opposed to tournaments where it's total points, but only for 14 weeks. And then it turns into daily fantasy for the playoff weeks, week 15, 16, 17, when you got to come in like top 2 or 3 in this really large group of 20 to 700 people, depending on the size of the tournament you're in. So you got to play for all the money. It's like,
like
people don't like putting all their
3.
eggs in one basket, but like when you're playing for literally all the eggs, it's not a bad strategy.
Yeah, like so for instance, Best Ball Mania 3, you're going to be more focused on an approach like that. That makes sense a lot there. Any common mistakes you see in playing in a contest like that?
In best ball?
Yeah.
the biggest mistake that people make in best ball that I've seen in tournaments, not just this year, but it was really prevalent this year because of how much content there is out there about people stacking and how powerful stacking is. People who are not drafting their own team in your friends and family league, like, if you and I were in a league and I saw you get a guy, I might grab your quarterback from you because I can needle you and I can poke at you and it's fun and we're in the room.
Right.
And correlation isn't as important in a one-man league, but in a tournament it is. So if you snipe somebody else's quarterback, you see that they drafted, let's say, Jamar Chase in the first, T. Higgins in the second. You say that they went after Austin Eckler in the first, Keenan Allen in the second, Mike Williams in the third round, right? You kind of know where they want to go with that team. They want to draft Herbert. They want to draft Burrow. So reaching ahead of ADP to snipe that quarterback from the stack does not help your team. In fact, it only hurts your team. If the quarterback has the year that team A that was stacking them believes that they're going to have, you've just fed all those hungry beasts on team A's team. And they're probably going to beat you because they're going to have a different quarterback, and the band of quarterback scoring is not that wide. So their team's going to beat you if the quarterback has that MVP caliber season. If the quarterback stinks, your team sucks too. So there's no winning if you're paying attention to some other team and saying, I'm going to take this guy from them because I know they want to stack. You're sinking your team, and you're also maybe sinking their team, but neither of you wins. It's the ultimate in crab philosophy. Crab mentality. So I may not get out of this bucket, but you ain't getting out either.
Right. I think that's great. I think that's I like hearing that too. Because, I mean, there is a natural instinct. Like, I see this guy's trying to do this.
Mm-hmm.
We got to stop him. No, there's
Don't
no price
stop him.
enforcing.
Draft your team and assume that everything's going to go according to your plan.
Exactly. We got to take one more break here. All of our podcasts are on the Blue Wire Network. We're going to put in their ads and do one more read real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks to our friends at the Blue Wire Network. We're also going to share a note with Vivid Seats. Hey, football fans, get your jerseys and your tailgate snacks ready. That's right. NFL season is back, and so is your choice to score tickets with Vivid Seats. Download the Vivid Seats app or visit vividseats.com to see your team's schedule, compare tickets, and secure your spot in the stands. As the only ticketing company with a reward program, Vivid Seats is the winning app for NFL fans like you. Earn credit when you buy 10 tickets, then cash it in to catch more games all season long. With tickets from Vivid Seats, you'll go from watching the game to being a part of it. Go to vividseats.com or find us in the App Store to browse unbeatable seats. We'll see you in the stadium. I've actually used Vivid Seats. Did a college trip with my daughter. Went to go see a Padres game that was sold out. Worked out pretty well, so that was pretty cool.
Very cool.
I like it when a sponsor is someone I can actually use every once in a while. That's pretty cool. Let's talk a couple differences. I want to get what are the big differences between when you're playing a main slate on DraftKings versus FanDuel? What are the key differences?
So obviously the scoring, right? So it's basically the same roster format, quarterback, 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, tight end, and a defense. The scoring is the main difference. So on DraftKings, there's 100-yard bonuses and it's full PPR. So it's a different game than FanDuel being half PPR with no bonuses.
Okay.
It's more reliant on touchdowns, which makes it a little bit more random and less volume oriented than, say, DraftKings is. The value plays on FanDuel are a little bit different. The pricing is slightly different. DraftKings has a little bit of a wider band where the most expensive player can be $10K, but the cheapest player can be $3K, where on FanDuel it's a bit of a more narrow band. I think the cheapest player is $4,500 up to $10K. I think just Jonathan Taylor is like $10,200 this week. So the pricing is a little bit different, but the game is mostly the same. But I would focus more on touchdown opportunity and touchdown percentage and touchdown upside on FanDuel as opposed to DraftKings, where you can get away with just drafting players who are going to get a ton of volume, specifically in the passing game, where you want to target targets.
Right. So a guy like, for instance, McCaffrey has got a little bit more power on DraftKings than he does on FanDuel. I know that's an obvious, or Eckler for that matter too.
Yeah. So, I mean, Eckler had 20 touchdowns last year too. How sticky that's going to be from one year to the next, I don't know. But like a player like Deebo Samuel, who on DraftKings second half of the season was a bit of a stickier play, a little bit, made you uncomfortable because he wasn't getting a ton of targets. So the floor to ceiling difference was massive. On FanDuel, it wasn't that big because you wanted that touchdown possibility. Same with Derrick Henry. Way more palatable a play on FanDuel on a week in, week out basis because of his touchdown equity that he brings into every game versus on DraftKings where he can have 80 yards rushing and no touchdowns and have no catches, and that's 8 fantasy points, as opposed to somebody who had 80 yards on 4 or 5 catches and massively outscores him.
Right. Do you find that one particular platform or the other misprices a certain type of player or a specific player?
I don't know if it's a specific player. The last few years, DraftKings has had tighter pricing than FanDuel.
Okay.
Where even though they have a wider range, even though the volume values can really be predominant, especially on a week like week 1. I used to do a FanDuel first look video on Tuesdays and a DraftKings first look video on Mondays. I don't do the FanDuel one anymore just because I have a lot of content to do and it just kind of got left on the cutting room floor. But people would take my DraftKings lineup from Monday and try and plug it in on FanDuel. And it was something like the DraftKings lineup, if you plugged it on FanDuel, would be like $5K under the salary cap on FanDuel. Like you could, the DraftKings one, here's the DraftKings. I can't even get close. I could have 2 more superstars on FanDuel with the lineup that you just put in. So FanDuel is a lot more friendly, let's say, to newer customers, or you could have much more powerful lineups, maybe to make up for the fact that it was more touchdown oriented.
Sure, that makes sense. As a volume player and a player that likes to play in tournaments, would you prefer tighter pricing or a little bit more wiggle room like you would have on FanDuel?
It kind of doesn't matter to me anymore. Like I used to say that I won more when it was softer, and I did. It was easier for me because people would be able to fit whatever they wanted. But no matter where you ratchet it, if you loosen it up a lot, people are going to focus on specific plays. If you tighten it up a bunch, they're going to say this is the only play because it's the only value play. But the constant between those two is the crowd is going to be in location A. And if you know where the crowd's going to be, you can find alternate routes to give your lineups leverage over the field. So like that's really the only thing I'm doing. It doesn't matter to me if they're in place A or place B. What matters to me is just having the idea and the knowledge of where they're going to be populating so that I can fill a vacated space somewhere else.
That makes sense. I always hear like poker players, like some poker players say, well, I want to go play at a level where they respect my raises. Or, I want to play at a tougher table because they don't do this donkey stuff. And other people are like, no, give me the soft table every time. Yeah. And so I was wondering if the same applies in DFS.
It's different in poker. Like I was on the poker tour for a few years before I started doing fantasy, and like you just play differently. Like if I'm at a professional level table, I'm going to be able to read the table and do certain things that I want to do. If I'm at a table with like I play now with like 2-table dad tournament on like a weeknight, and like some of them are just playing 5-card bingo where they're just not going to fold ever to any bet, and it doesn't matter what they have. They have third pair, they're not going away. You can beat that game. You just have to play differently.
Yep, that's true.
Like, if the table's loose, you play tight. If the table's tight, you play a little bit looser and splash around a little bit. It's very art of war. If your opponent is weak, attack. If your opponent's strong, retreat.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. Let's look at week 1. Quarterbacks. Is there a particular player that you find that you don't have to, I don't want you to like tell me all of your plays. Obviously you've got your own content to provide, but what's one player you can tell me, either FanDuel or DraftKings, one guy that you think you'll have a decent amount of exposure to?
I think Jalen Hurts is going to be extremely popular for good reason. He averaged like 9 fantasy points a game last year just with his legs. Before he threw one pass, he was getting you 9 fantasy points. And because the wide receiver room has been beefed up as well as it has been beefed up, bringing in a true alpha, and then having somebody like Smith being on the other side facing single coverage as accomplished the route runner as he is, and as solid a tight end as he has in Goddard, and a good pass catching core of running backs, that could drastically increase his passing efficiency. And efficiency, not volume, is what leads to quarterback scoring in fantasy. So he'll still bring all that value with his legs and could see increased efficiency through the air. And he's like 1,000 less than all the big dogs on DraftKings, where Herbert and Mahomes and Lamar are from like 7,500 to 8,000, where Hurts is 6,800. I think he's going to be extremely popular this week.
Yep. Conversely, is there one that you just think that is either really bad matchup or bad price? Is there someone that you won't be rostering a whole lot of?
There's a lot that I don't roster. I don't play a ton of quarterbacks. So like that's I everything to me is around stacking for tournaments. So like I want to get quarterbacks that I think are in positive situations that could get me a 30+ point game on DraftKings. So if I don't think that they have a ceiling above 30 points, I'm probably not going to play them. Of the expensive quarterbacks, like to go out on a limb, I guess, I think all of them are in play. The one I'm least excited about would be Aaron Rodgers. Of all the stuff, from Jalen Hurts being 6,800, Mahomes, Herbert, Jackson, Murray, Rodgers, and Hurts are the top 6 priced quarterbacks on DraftKings. I would say my least favorite of that grouping would probably be Aaron Rodgers, only because of the diminished wide receiver room without Adams, and now it possibly is without 2 of his favorite pass catchers that are returning if Lazard doesn't play and Tunyon can't make it back either.
Sure.
They might just have a very grinded out, slow the game down, run it with our 2 running backs, run it 40+ times, and not give him the amount of attempts that he would need to get it done.
I'd agree. And in fact, I'd go one step further. I like if you want to look on the gaming side of things, I like the under in this game. I think this is going to, I know the Rams want to probably pick up the pace on this one here. I think the Packers are going to lean on their defense a lot, especially early on as he gets used to his new receiver, as Rodgers gets used to his new receiver core. This was a strong defense anyhow. It was a slow offense already anyhow. How many times did we see like Rodgers always run it down to 2 or 3 seconds left on the play clock? This is already a feature with this offense, and I think it's only going to be magnified this year.
You very well could be right. It's just it's a situation where I'm not. This is a game that has a high total with them against Minnesota, and he has outperformed his average fantasy points per game against the rest of the league the last 3 years by 10%. If he average, like he scores more fantasy points against Minnesota defense than he has against anybody else the last 3 years.
That's true.
But like, if I'm spending up at quarterback, he's probably the one I'm least excited about playing. On this weekend slate, I'd rather play Kyler. I'd rather play Mahomes, Herbert. Like, give me any of those other guys.
There's a couple of big divisional games. That game, Cincy, Pittsburgh, another one, New England, Miami again in week 1. It seems like they keep doing that matchup in week 1, but usually you kind of wait to see those later in the season. It's interesting to see these right off the bat.
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird to see all that stuff in week 1. It's usually a couple of weeks in.
Yeah. Exactly. Hey, I know you got a lot of things on your plate. So thank you for taking some time with us today. Tell everybody again where they can find you.
So I stream every day on Twitch 5 days a week, and I stream the last 45 minutes before kickoff every Sunday. Videos 2 a day on YouTube on 2 different channels. Article on Thursday on ESPN Plus. It's called Best Buys and the Fantasy Focus podcast. You can find links to everything that I do in smizzle.tv/links. It's all in one place. That's where the link tree is. You can find everything that I do, as well as the charity fundraiser that we're running this year, trying to raise $100,000 for No Kid Hungry.
How do you tell me more about that?
We did it last year. Community raised $35,000. So our community goal is $50,000 this year, and I'm going to match every 10,000 that we raise. So when the community gets to 10, I'll add another 10. When they get to 20 from the community, I'll add another 10, all the way up to 50,000 from the community. And I will, at that point, hopefully have donated 50,000 myself, getting us to $100,000 together.
I love it. And please check that out. Link again on that one.
It's all in the smizzle.tv/charity, but all the links are in the link tree at smizzle.tv/links.
All right. There you go. Al, great talking with you. It's been a while since we've seen each other at a conference, so glad to do it this way. And maybe we'll see each other at Chevy every once in a while.
Sure.
We're each playing less softball than we used to, but maybe we'll cross paths there too. Big thanks to everybody for listening in. Thanks for your questions. Good luck in your first your lineups here in week 1. Take care.